good, my peoples? Welcome again to another edition of the GreenBaje podcast. The green half of the GreenBaje podcast is missing again today. So we are going to hold it down in his absence. Again with me this week, we have Ricky Nurse and Mark Thompson, our draft experts. How is it going, gentlemen?
Good, good. How goes it in warm and balmy Denver?
Yeah, man. Right now it is 65 degrees. It's 6:03 p.m. It's 65 degrees. We're expecting some rain this afternoon, which is not a customary thing here in the green desert that is Denver. But no, we're taking a page out of the book of the Nuggets. Right now, we're just saying it feels like summer because they're dealing with the sun or the suns at this point in time. What about you, Mark? How's it going?
Oh, I'm good. That's good. No issues here at all. I'm good.
All right. Glad to hear it.
Had a good long weekend. We had a good long weekend here.
Yeah, that is one of the things I definitely miss. Not being home this time of year because you guys would have had Friday and Monday off.
That is correct.
Whereas we would have been, I was at home on Friday and in the office on Monday. So, yeah, that's the way how the cookie crumbles at times. You know, if you're looking at this week's episode, it's called Heaven Only Knows. Because when we were talking about the draft last week, the closing thought that you guys gave was that heaven only knew what was going to happen. We were not going to be able to feel that strongly in our predictions. And, well, I guess that's the way it went. So, off the rip, we are talking about the draft, and we've had 7 rounds, 253 picks, I think I saw. Because some picks got taken away because of some shenanigans that some of these
Mhm.
teams were up to. So, as we get this conversation going, there are always things that happen that catches you off guard. And I know that one of the things that would have got you caught off guard would have been that trade done for the Houston Texans to get back up to number 3. But I think we can talk about the trades a little bit later. Outside of that one trade, what was the biggest surprise for this draft weekend?
Biggest surprise. Um, I want to say maybe the fact that they only had 3 corners drafted in the first round, and actually one of the main corners he dropped out of the first round. Granted, he was picked at the top of the second round, but but not only did they drop one dropped out, but they also just dropped lower, and I think that's because of what happened up front in the draft. It changed everything, and so you had Gonzalez, the second corner, not going before pick 17, and that pushed the corners down the draft board, which I thought was quite interesting. That was a bit of a surprise to me because I didn't think I thought the 4 corners would definitely have been gone and then possibly an opportunity for a fifth. So that surprised me.
Okay. What were you, Ricky? What was the biggest surprise this weekend?
Well, for me, um, I'm gonna change my mark and I exchange notes at the beginning, and I get change mine because you
That
being
sound like what
the
happened like last week, you know? Okay, go ahead.
because because Ken being the great moderator and host and traffic cop that he is, he just gave me a curveball like what I gave Mark last week. So I guess we could say that I had that coming. So I'm gonna pivot here now because I like how Ken phrased it. Other than the trade, I was gonna come with the trade, but I'm gonna go a little different. I'm gonna say my biggest surprise was that we had 17 players invited to Kansas City in what they call the green room. And traditionally, if only 17 are in the green room and we have 31 picks on that opening night, one would imagine that all 17 of those prospects should be drafted on that night because you're hardly going to accept that invitation unless you have it on semi decent authority that your player is going. We actually had 4 players who were left in that green room, after 31 selections were made. Everyone knows about one of those players because that player, to his credit or discredit, was very visible and his entire family circle, one could argue. That was Kentucky quarterback Will Levis. However, we had a Georgia Tech edge rusher, Keon White, who eventually went to the Patriots. He actually didn't look very happy when that happened either.
Oh dear.
We had Penn State cornerback Joey Porter Jr., who was also, I understand, not very pleased. And his dad, who also played in the NFL, had to perk him up for the second day. And Alabama safety Brian Branch. So I would have to say, having watched this draft with my fellow New York um, expert slash psycho, that was the biggest surprise because I remember when we were going through our mock draft, we made it a point to know who were the 17 prospects invited. We made it a point when we drafted to say, you know what, if we're going to split the hairs on a pick, let's err on the side of these 17 that the NFL has invited. So it was the first time, and certainly the period that I've been following the draft, that I've ever been aware of 4 players going into day number 2 without being drafted. Let me also add, and this would be for the purposes of our comrade AJ, who's not here, that 3 of those 4 players opted not to come back for day number 2. So we will make the joke that I know I made with Ken when this happened after the first day, that they didn't have suits for day 2, therefore they didn't attend day number 2. But I think that was the biggest surprise because I've never seen a situation where 4 players were not drafted and were put in the unfortunate position of having to make a decision if to reappear for day number 2.
So here's the question: as we are talking about this now, we did a draft of 31 picks. How many of these picks did we actually get right?
Right in what way, sir? Mark and I also discussed this. If you are asking how many of the 31 were actually drafted in round number 1, Mark, you have the answer. We know Ken was
27.
going to ask.
27.
27 of 31 were actually going in round 1. Now, if your question, sir, pertains to how many actually went to the teams that we picked, the answer is very different, correct, Mark?
Absolutely. Not
It
very
ended up
many.
being-
Maybe it was
it
3.
ended up being- or 4, correct.
3 or 4,
Correct.
yeah.
Right, yeah. So it's
We may have,
yeah.
we will get, it would be a little better if you start looking at positions. That improves a bit. But certainly, and we did say that at the very end of our discussion that we don't know what's going to happen. But at least I think we don't want to. I don't want to sit here and say, okay, like we got this right and all this sort of thing. I just want to say that at least what it meant was that the top 31 players, we kind of got it right who was going to be picked amongst those. That's what we got right. Where they went to, different story. But one thing I would point out that Ricky absolutely nailed was that B.J. Robinson went to the Falcons at number 8, and we nailed that there were two running backs to go in the first round.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that what is very interesting to highlight here as well, in your guys' favor, to your credit, you picked 27 of the 31 players who were going to be drafted, regardless of where they were going to go. You picked 27 of the 31. And the 4 that you would have gotten wrong are the 4 that the NFL also got wrong by picking and bringing them to the green room and then having them sit there for all of the picks to go through and then potentially decide if I'm coming back tomorrow or not. So,
Perspective, sir. Well done. I like
kudos
how
to
you.
you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So now you made mention of him, Ricky, and I think that this deserves a bit of a conversation. Will Levis, who had quite a bit of buzz going into the NFL draft. I mean, to his credit, he seemed to have been the best non-black quarterback in the draft. So the expectation was that Levis was going to find a home on the first day, and then unfortunately for him, he was the one that the cameras were going to focus on as he is sitting there with his family and maybe one or some people are rumoring two girlfriends at the time as not being picked at all on day number one, and then having the option to return on day number two. But of course, him being the high profile player that he is, he would not want to have the camera in his face all day long while he's waiting for somebody to call his name. So when Levis is falling to day two, well, this is a two-part question. So firstly, why do you think this happened? What caused him to fall to day number two? And the second part of this is, should this be instructive for other quarterbacks, especially for future draft years when you may not be the slam dunk number one overall pick? Maybe you don't go to the green room. Ricky, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this. Recent history, we saw a quarterback who was labeled as inaccurate or not the most accurate in Lamar Jackson have a similar fall in the eyes of some. We saw Jalen Hurts, who had a record of success at both Alabama and Oklahoma, but was labeled as not being accurate, fall to the second round in recent time. And going into this, all that they picked apart with Levis, he was also labeled as not being accurate. Now, in fairness, when we did our mock offline, we had Levis falling out of the first round. When we did our mock last week, we went a different direction. We had Anthony Richardson as that person. So we kind of felt that one of these guys was going to fall on the basis of the criticism of being inaccurate. I do think, though, that there may have been some other issues more related to maybe the attitude and preparation of the athlete. Because I always say, if all of those teams, with the exception of those who didn't have first round picks, such as the Rams and 49ers, were able to let you go by in a draft that ended up having a record number of quarterbacks drafted, it tells me that there had to be something beyond accuracy at play with Levis. I will say this, though, this was one year that they fooled us all, because Levis and his entire family circle certainly did not expect to fall like that as either.
What about you, Mark? What do you think happened with Levis?
Um, I'm not sure about preparation. Well, I feel I like Levis, and I think he's been a little bit hard done. And people talk about his accuracy, but they're not looking at all his years. They're not looking, let's say, at 2021, for instance, and you're not looking at now who he has to throw to, and the fact that he's had 4 offensive coordinators in 4 years. That's just my take on Levis. But anyway, he has all the attributes, all. When Josh Allen came into the 1918 draft as a 50-something percentage completion rate, the Bills traded up to get him. I think Levis's personality is what scares people a little bit. He is really out there a little bit, mayonnaise in your coffee, eating the banana with the banana peel, his arrogance, all of that, I think, has contributed to him dropping, and hopefully it's a lesson for him. I always felt that the best fit for him was the Titans, and he eventually went to the Titans. But I think his personality is really the issue at hand. I really do think he has all the tools. I mean, people say that last year he probably forced it a bit. Some people think that he wasn't seeing the field right, and I don't know. I just think that he didn't have a lot going on around him, and he had to force it a bit. I think time will tell, though. We'll see how he does.
Okay, so the question I would have with regards to Levis before we move off of him as a topic of conversation is that there are some who are looking at what happened to Levis and bringing back memories of one Josh Rosen.
Oh dear.
who also thought that he would have been picked higher than he was. And he made the now infamous statement of, you know, all of these teams have made a mistake, and I'm going to prove to them that they made the wrong choice by passing on me. And now Levis, as you said, he does have the reputation, be it earned or otherwise, of having a similar streak of arrogance. Do you think that this is a fair comparison? And does this what what effect would this have on his prospects going forward?
Mm, I don't know. Levis doesn't show any, in my opinion. He's a hard worker. Josh Rosen had an issue of whether he was a hard worker, and having a privileged background and all that sort of thing. I don't get that with Levis. The personality and the arrogance is an issue, yes. And maybe this will humble him. I really don't know. I haven't heard him say anything. I haven't heard any statements come up from him or anything like that. I didn't. Um, I did obviously hear what Josh Rosen said at the time, but I think Josh Rosen, it was thought at the time that does he really love the game? Is he really going to put in the time and effort to be a very good QB? That was what I got from him. I don't get that impression from Levis. That's not what I would see. I don't see that as a downfall.
Okay. What about you, Ricky?
A little different for me because I remember when Levis was not chosen as the starter at Penn State, he got out of Dodge in a hurry. We kind of accepted that he made that decision, and that was well within his right as it is. But I just find it again instructive that though those storylines resurfaced over the last 3 days, and you know me, guys, I always say when I see these kind of things leaking in inverted commas, I always ask myself why. Because he was backing up a QB by the name of Sean Clifford, which to his credit, he evolved and he went higher in the draft than Sean Clifford did. But he left Happy Valley as a very unhappy camper, pun intended. And I always remember when Levis left Penn State, and everybody, where is he gonna go? That kind of thing. He did have an image reconstruction to do then, and he's in a similar situation now. So while I don't agree with the Rosen comparison on the basis of kind of the entitled rich kid, which I would be more apt to place that comparison on my New York Jets backup, one Zach Wilson, who reminds me a lot of Rosen in the context of privilege. I think Levis will have to really ensure that he don't find himself having to rework his image for a third time, because this is the second time in his career now that he's had to kind of defend behavior, albeit banana peels and mayonnaise and coffee aside.
All right. So I think we've given Levis enough airtime. He had enough on Thursday. So
Let's put this weekend. He's on to strike three. He's had 2 strikes. He's on to strike 3.
All right. Well, let's hope for his sake that he is able to, get on base this time and get some more swings at the ball going forward. Because if he strikes out now, then it's all
correct.
Agreed.
All right.
Yeah.
So this draft saw the most trades in NFL draft history, with 42 trades being consummated over the 3 days. I've been trying to find the information for all the trades. Can't nail it down just yet. But what I want to do, I want to go through the first round of the draft, and you'll hear how that went. So first up was the Carolina Panthers via trade, selecting Bryce Young, quarterback from Alabama. Houston Texans, they took C.J. Stroud, quarterback from Ohio State, which belied all of the conversations about his 18% score in that test that that they didn't put much stock into that. So hopefully for him, we'll see how good that goes. Number 3 overall was the Texans again via trade. They selected Will Anderson Jr., edge from Alabama. The Indianapolis Colts, they took Anthony Richardson, who many thought that he was the one, as you guys said too, may have been the one to slide out of the first round, but the Colts have decided to go with the most athletic quarterback in the draft. Some are saying that Richardson could be the most athletic quarterback we've ever seen. So time will tell again. But they stayed put at number 4. Seattle Seahawks, they took the 5th pick via trade. Devon Witherspoon, cornerback from Illinois. Arizona Cardinals via trade. 6th, Paris Johnson, offensive tackle from Ohio State. The Raiders stayed at 7 with Tyree Wilson, edge from Texas Tech. Bijan Robinson, the running back from Texas, went to the Falcons at 8. The Eagles traded up to get Jalen Carter at 9, defensive tackle from Georgia. The Chicago Bears traded to 10 for Darnell Wright, offensive tackle, Tennessee. The Titans, Peter Skoronski, offensive tackle from Northwestern, at 11. The Detroit Lions, 12, Jahmyr Gibbs, running back, Alabama. Green Bay Packers, 13, via trade. Lucas Van Ness, edge, Iowa. Number 14, Pittsburgh Steelers, via trade. Broderick Jones, offensive tackle, Georgia. Number 15, New York Jets, via trade. Will McDonald IV, edge, Iowa State. Number 16, Emmanuel Forbes for the Washington Commanders, cornerback from Mississippi State. Number 17, New England Patriots, via trade. Christian Gonzalez, cornerback, Oregon. Detroit Lions, 18, Jack Campbell, linebacker, Iowa. Number 19, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Khalija Kancey, defensive tackle from Pitt. Seattle Seahawks, Jackson Smith and Jigba, wide receiver, Ohio State. LA Chargers, Quentin Johnston, wide receiver, Texas Christian. Number 22, Baltimore Ravens, Zay Flowers, wide receiver, Boston College. 23, Minnesota Vikings, Jordan Addison, wide receiver, Southern California. We got quite a few wide receivers going here in a row.
4 in a row.
4 in a row. Then New York Giants, via trade, Deontay Banks, cornerback from Maryland. Buffalo Bills, via trade, Dalton Kincaid, tight end, Utah. Dallas Cowboys, Maisie Smith, defensive tackle, Michigan. Jacksonville Jaguars, via trade, Anton Harrison, offensive tackle, Oklahoma. Cincinnati Bengals, 28, Miles Murphy, edge, Clemson. New Orleans Saints, via trade, Brian Breesy, defensive tackle, Clemson. Philadelphia Eagles, 30, Nolan Smith, edge, Georgia. And then the Kansas City Chiefs, Felix Anudike Uzoma, edge, Kansas State. So those are a lot of trades that affected just the first round, and then there's a whole ton of trades that also happened as the days went on, including a trade that was not well. I guess it did have an effect on the draft because we had DeAndre Swift being traded from the Lions to the Eagles. So guys, tell me about what happened here. Why were there so many trades in this year's draft?
I think everybody's big board was so different. That's what I think. I think everybody had a completely different. You may get some teams that had only 15 graded first round players, some teams that had 22, and then the players weren't all the same. And people really went after needs. So they people were very aggressive in going after needs. So need meeting value, or in some cases, some people might argue need didn't necessarily meet value, because I mean the Lions, whatever you want to say, they say, well, we just took who we wanted. We want a good player, and we got that. But in some cases, I think in most cases, really, it was okay. We only have so many players, and we are going to go aggressively after who we want. And whether that's a trend or not, I don't know, because the trades are increasing. And especially, I think this draft, once you got past round 3, middle 4, you really, matter of fact, round 3, I would say, you really, it's anybody's game. I mean, There are all sorts of things going on. There are not a lot of players that you would think that may be starting. Um, no real gems necessarily. Not too many gems in the fourth round and onward. You may get a few, but not a whole lot. You might get, let's say, from the running back situation because the running backs were deep or tight ends were deep, but other than that, even though they had a lot of good corners, they weren't necessarily as deep as those two positions. That's my thought in relation to that.
Okay, no problem. And shout out to AJ. He's joined us in the chat. Welcome, sir. Glad that you could sneak in here with us. Ricky, what about you? Tell me about these trades. What do you think influenced all of this trading activity?
Yes, well, firstly, good evening to AJ, and let's kindly note that the Patriots drafted a punter and a kicker in this draft, and then and with that, I will say good evening to my guy AJ. Um,
Wow.
I I actually think that the story behind a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, the rebirth of those plucky Detroit Lions, I believe it is the reality that you can turn it around quickly in the NFL that has a lot more teams hopeful and is putting a lot more pressure on the general managers and the ownership to have a story similar to that. So if you're an AFC team, you use the Bengals as Exhibit A. And if you are an NFC team, you can use the Lions. A few years ago, you may want to use the Eagles for all we know. So I think that that's what's springing a lot of hope there. Some people who would argue you can use Mark's Giants from last year and their playoff run and winning a first round playoff game. So I think that if you look at a team like the Giants, who found themselves in the playoffs, won a playoff game in quick time. If you look at a team like the Bengals, who got a quarterback, paired them with the right wide receiver, and in quick time they're now an AFC bully. I think that that's more than ever is what is spurring in these teams to say, look, we need to get the right person. We need to nail this draft so that we can be the team that goes from worst to first in 24 months.
All right. So AJ has asked a question here. He said that he was glad, Mark, that you mentioned the running back situation because he was a bit puzzled with Atlanta, excuse me, taking Bijan Robinson. I mean, you guys did predict that this was happening, so give him a little bit more as to this Bijan to Atlanta situation.
I can take this one because one I was Mark would tell you I was so proud when this actually happened on Thursday night. But I think that teams have the identity, or a lot of teams have the identity of their head coach and by extension their coaching staff. So you have a situation in Atlanta where you have a head coach who said, "Look, I believed in a guy by the name of Derrick Henry. I have built my offense around that and a strong running game. My name is Arthur Smith, and I am a runaholic." So Arthur Smith has decided, listen to me, we are going to improve this offensive line. We are going to take a philosophy that says, when I start mine in the trenches against yours, I will find gaps. And as they say in one of those infamous NFL videos, I want a seal here and a seal here, and we can run it in the alley. And believe it or not, the Atlanta Falcons were the second most run heavy team in the NFL last season. They took a 6th-round running back by the name of Tyler Algier from BYU and made him into a 1,000-yard, 7-touchdown running back. And they probably said to themselves, if I can get this weapon called Bijan Robinson, I can take this approach and do it against Ken Saints and do it against those Tampa Bay Buccaneers and do it against the Carolina Panthers. And I think that it's just a case of these head coaches being very vested in their philosophy, and they're going to build these teams out around that philosophy. So in this case, Atlanta is saying, we know what we are. We're not sure what our QB is, but we know that we can run the ball among the best in the league. So we are taking the weapon that gives us the best opportunity of doing so.
Yeah, and to that point as well, Ricky, when you remember what Atlanta had last season, it's not just Algier that they had, but it was also Cordell Patterson, who
Yes.
was their number one ball carrying
Yes.
option. So
Yes, Swiss Army knife. That is very true. Just if I can answer AJ's question as well. Yes, he is good, but I do agree. I think because these teams are hell bent on finding um what would you call it? They want these assets that just give them a better offense. Period. So this particular player, Bijan Robinson, you can put him in the slot and he can play slot receiver. So he's the versatility, I think, is what led to that, and what also led to, which I'm sure Ken will come to, some other running back madness as we saw on United the first round.
yeah, so the question you're just asking here now is so essentially Bijan's projection is that high that he was worth a top five pick. Generally asking because he knew he was good, but didn't realize he was that highly touted. Mark, your take on this situation with Bijan?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I want to add to what I mean. I agree with everything Ricky said, but I want to also add the fact that you have a second year QB who is also, um, you know, he's second year QB. So let's get the running game going. Let's get our offensive line good, because the best friend of a rookie QB or relatively new QB, young QB, is going to be that running game and protection. And so I think that's one of the major reasons why they would have gone for Bijan, other than the modus operandi of Arthur Smith. But Bijan, I think you can argue. Yeah, I think you might be able to argue that he might have been a top five player, one of the top five players in the draft. But because running backs are so devalued, you're not expecting it to happen. I think along the line we recognized that it was likely that he would be picked higher. I think at one point in time we thought, oh well, he might get picked down at number 30 near the end of the first round. But I think we quickly recognized that he may be picked early, and that, hence, I mean, Ricky called it perfectly. Atlanta Falcons. We've everybody speculated about him going to the Eagles. Of course, when the Eagles pull off that trade with Swift, well, obviously that's not happening anymore. Leaves the door wide open, and Falcons went for it. But just to make a little correction, Bijan was taken at number 8 by the Falcons. Not quite at number 5, but I do believe that people recognize his talent. He is he's clearly a very good receiver and not just a running back. So he's a weapon.
Yeah, so it just added that it shot him more so because he figured that they would have tried to get some defense in since they haven't had
Thank
one since Moses was a toddler.
Yeah.
But he did salute Rick on the call for Bijan Robinson going to the Falcons. So
Let
I
me
know,
let me just add that there, Mr. Moderator, that
sure.
both things can be true. Ricky can be right, and the Falcons could be wrong.
Very fair point. So I know this is not something that I had sent to you guys in the rundown. If you have a name, you can throw it out there. If you don't have a name, that's fine. I'm just thinking of which team to you had the best draft and which team had the worst draft.
Ooh, the worst. Ooh.
Mm,
Because
I
to give you a couple of seconds to think about it, because obviously, like I said, I'm not the biggest draft guy. So I have been looking to see what some of the experts have been saying, and they've on Pro Football Focus, for example, they've given some teams between an A plus and a B that I've seen so far. I've not seen anybody go so low as a C. Well, actually, no, that's not true. The Dallas Cowboys got a C plus. So AJ's people might not be very happy with the folks at Pro Football Focus for that C plus grade. So, who do you think had the best draft? Let's start there.
I know that is such a difficult question. I mean, because drafts don't you don't really know how a draft class is going to do till what, maybe 2 3 years out.
Hmm.
Um, but on paper, and you said best, right?
Yes, best first.
best and worst, sir.
Yeah, best and worst. I mean, I think the Bengals had a really good draft. I definitely think the Bengals had a good draft. Um, I think the Seahawks had a good draft too. Um, but I mean, I don't want to mention my team, but to be honest with you, I think the Giants had a good draft too. I mean, the Giants had in the first 3 rounds 3 guys that were mocked to them in the first round. You know, so I mean, I would say they had a good draft as well. Worst draft. Let me think about that there for a moment. Let me get Ricky to tell you his best and worst.
Yes. For me, the best draft was the Pittsburgh Steelers. First of all, because they ridiculously jumped my New York Jets, did a trade with the hated New England Patriots, and took Broderick Jones off the board, leaving me with no offensive tackle when it was time for me to pick at number 15. So definitely, I would have to think. But when you go through the Steelers filled every single need: offensive lineman, tight end, everything that they needed to improve Kenny Pickett. They went. They were the ones that were able to get Joey Porter Jr. So the cornerback need was filled. So for me, the Pittsburgh Steelers were definitely up there because every single round the Steelers were able to get a position of need, and the position of need was generally a player that was rated in the top 4 or 5 at the position on most draft boards. So round one, you got Broderick Jones. All right, that was unfortunate for those below them. You come in, you get Joey Porter Jr. You get the defensive tackle out of Wisconsin who was well rated as well, who was like the some people say the Cam Hayward of this particular draft. You come and get Darnell Washington falling to you in round 3, which a lot of people had him as a potential second rounder. You get Herbig, a linebacker out of Wisconsin. We all know when Pittsburgh drafts a linebacker or wide receiver, how that goes. And then in round 7, criminally, they allow you to get a cornerback out of Purdue called Corey Trice, who a lot of people had as a sleeper. So it was one of those nights for me. I know a lot of people rated other teams. The worst draft for me was very, very simple. It was the San Francisco 49ers, who used pick number 99 for a kicker out of the University of Michigan by the name of Luke Moody.
Jake
I mean,
Moody.
you could actually...
Jake Moody.
Jake, sorry, Moody. Sorry. You could feel the buzz on whatever network you were watching it at, or whatever YouTube channel you were watching it on when that happened, because nobody saw that coming, including Mr. Moody and his family, who I'm sure were just as shocked as the rest of us. But then the rest of the draft for the 49ers were not that good either. And the irony is that you don't even know some of the assets that they were drafting. Are they drafting them to suit Mr. Brock Purdy, or are you drafting them to suit Mr. Trey Lance? So all in all, the 49ers left us all scratching our heads.
Okay. So before I go through what I was here, making notes of very quickly as you guys were speaking. So AJ, he said that the Pats had the worst draft. He has no great analysis to back it up. He just has history to go by. And that they drafted a corner in the first round who's probably going to develop well and then get traded when it's time to pay him. So, I mean, then I think AJ is speaking off of a lot of emotion. That is my GreenBaje brother, but at the same time,
It's trigger warnings. Trigger.
Yes, he has had some very rough moments in the draft in the past. So, to the names that you guys have suggested, I'm going according to the Pro Football Focus ratings.
Let me.
So,
Can I? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to say that I had a thought about the worst draft.
Go ahead. Give it to
And
me.
I Patriots and Rams, kind of iffy drafts, but I think the Jags and the Jaguars and the Chargers did not have good drafts. Those two, they definitely did not. Especially, I'm not sure which one between the two, but they did not have good drafts at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right, no problem. I'm just trying to find where the Jaguars fell on this page so I can make a note of their grade. Okay, got it. All right, so to Mark, you said the Bengals. You thought the Bengals had one of the best drafts. All right.
Yeah.
They were given an A according to Pro Football Focus. The Seattle Seahawks were also given an A by Pro Football Focus. The Giants were given an A plus, so
There you
they
go.
have one of the best drafts. Ricky, you said the Steelers. The
Yes, I
Steelers
did, sir.
also received an A plus grade on their draft. Another team that got an A plus on their draft that was not mentioned by you or even by AJ, who's out there bemoaning his Pats. The Philadelphia Eagles also received an A plus grade on their draft.
You might know why I may not have mentioned them.
Of course. So now to AJ's Pats. The Patriots were given an A minus on their draft. So AJ, there is some hope. At least Pro Football Focus thought that your draft was much better than you think it was. The Los Angeles Rams, they received an A minus for their draft. And the Chargers also received an A minus for their draft. Now, Ricky, here's where you can pat yourself on the back again.
Oh dear.
Because the San Francisco 49ers, by my scrolling, have received the worst grade of everyone.
Yes, thank you.
They
Thank
got
you very
a
much.
C minus.
Oh,
Thank you. I'll take it.
And then the Jacksonville Jaguars, they got a B.
It'll be.
Okay.
They got a B for their draft. It just says he's seeing into the future. So I guess, Mark, as you said, in 2 to 3 years, we will see just how good or how poor this draft was for everyone. It just says that they drafted 2 receivers in one round, and he has a feeling that both don't make the active roster.
The thing is, in the past, I would just have laughed that off when AJ said that, but in recent time, I have learned not to laugh at those comments by AJ anymore because he has been quite prophetic of late when it comes to his Patriots and the results of their draft.
Especially
wrong
at the
six,
skills
though.
position.
That's in round 6.
Especially.
Yeah, because in round 6, they took Keyshawn Boot from LSU.
Yeah, Boutte from LSU. But I find it interesting too on that note for AJ because they lost Damian Harris, who's gone on to Buffalo as a free agent, and they didn't draft a running back, which was a little strange. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of odd. All right, gents. So now we're looking at the picks themselves. Who do you believe would be the biggest or best value pick? So a player relative to position drafted for their team. Who do you believe will give the most sneaky value of all of these players drafted this weekend?
I can let Mark start with this one.
That's a good question. I am tempted to say the running back, BJ Robinson, at number 8. Maybe he could be considered. You know what? But I'm gonna go something different. I am going to go with Christian Gonzalez at number 17 to the Patriots because I had him rated as my number 1 corner, and I certainly did not expect him to drop to 17. I thought he would have been definitely not get past 10. But the way how the draft went with the trades, it obviously pushed down. But at the same time, there was opportunity for him to go possibly before. But I guess, as I said, people were really going needs, meeting value. And so I was surprised that Christian Gonzalez dropped all the way to 17 to the Patriots. That surprised me. So I think that's probably the best value.
Okay. So just before you go, Ricky, so it just said that he thinks that the Patriots picked up James Robinson, formerly
Oh
of
yes, as a
the
free agent,
Jaguars.
yeah,
So
you did, it did.
yeah, so that is why they probably did not go the route of running back in the draft. All right, Ricky. So who do you believe is going to be the best value pick of the players drafted this weekend?
All right, again, I'm gonna go two prong on my answer here. In round number one, I will go with Nolan Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles, who they got with pick number 30, and again, how we annoyed everyone with the fact that this player fell to them because, albeit he's been described as undersized, Mark reminded me earlier today that teams can find a way and a role for those kind of players, and he could be undersized until they find some pharmaceuticals to get him oversized or right sized. But so I have to go with Nolan Smith on the talent that is the player, even though the size may not be ideal as he enters the draft. To get a player of his quality at pick number 30 in the first round, definitely a steal by the Eagles. In terms of outside of that round, I will go with the quarterback that the Lions selected in round 3, Hendon Hooker. Simply because we have seen it in recent times with, and I'll repeat this, with a Jalen Hurts, where you can get a quarterback. It's not a first round draft pick. Work their tail off, get the offense adjusted or tweaked to suit the talents of the player, and then all of a sudden you have a situation as we saw with the Eagles and Hurts. So I think that he's a player that I followed at Tennessee. And I think he can learn and grow from there. So he may be one of those people that ends up being a 10-year starter, for example. For the Lions, if we look back on it and say, did you know he was a second round a third round NFL draft pick?
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm not the biggest draft guy. So I was not, I had heard the name Hendon Hooker heading into the draft. I had no idea until you mentioned it just now, Ricky, that Hendon Hooker fell all the way to the third round.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep. Part of it was his injury,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was an ACL, and
Yeah.
may likely, who knows when he will be able to play, but that's part of it.
Yeah, because I'm still here on the Pro Football Focus website, and it says because they actually give like a little blurb, a little paragraph on every player that was picked.
Right.
They said Lions quarterback Jared Goff has 2 years remaining on his contract, so the Lions are wise to draft a potential successor behind him. Hooker fell in the draft after an unfortunate ACL tear at the end of the 2022 season that took him out of a Heisman race, but he earned a 93.4 passing grade on deep throws and is great in a clean pocket. If he can improve under pressure once healthy, he could prove to be a great pick. So, yeah, I will be forced to agree with you there, Ricky, that Hendon Hooker, he is well positioned, especially when you don't pick him in the first round, that he can be um, the guy going forward. Now, AJ says, Mark, I like your selection, but it just confirms my fears. This is another JC Jackson situation in the making.
Mm-hmm.
He could be right. Again, both things could be true. It could be a fantastic draft pick, and then 4 years from now he walks. That is true.
Yeah, very true.
So let's see what Pro Football Focus had to say about Mr. Gonzalez, because I don't know Mr. Gonzalez.
I mean, there've been quite a few little gems throughout. I mean, a center like Luke Whippler, I think, went, if I remember memory serves me correctly, somewhere down in like round 6. You know, I mean, there are a few little gems around around there. You know, and I think he's a pretty good center. So to get him in round 6, you know, it's pretty good.
Yeah, so what Pro Football Focus says about Mr. Gonzalez is that the Patriots moved down to 17th overall. They added a fourth round pick and still landed the second best cornerback on the PFF big board. So
Mm-hmm. Yep.
that's good for them. All
It
right.
is.
So now that we've talked about the one that might be the best value, there's always the other side of things. Who is the biggest reach? Ricky, start with you on this one. Who do you think is the biggest reach? Well, before we get to that, AJ has a question in the chat. He wanted to ask you guys. I guess you mostly discussed it, but Tennessee moving up. No, we talked about it from Levis' position, but with Tennessee moving up to get Levis, is this the end now for Malik Willis, or is it just competition for the young man?
I would agree that this is looking like the beginning of the end for young Malik Willis. Because let's be real, Tennessee don't want to invest in one quarterback furthermore too. So I think that Mr. Willis's days are numbered, and you hate to see it because he too fell to round 3 last year when he had rumors of first round capital. But again, when you hear these teams allow this kind of talk to be leaked, you start to question the reason why. And we were hearing the talk of, they're not happy with Willis. Um, they are going to go and get a quarterback because they're not happy with Willis. The fact that they allow that kind of narrative to be spun so openly in the lead up to a draft or during the weekend of the draft, these franchises know why they do that to these players, unfortunately. So I think his days may be numbered. Let's put it this way: he could not have played as bad as my backup QB1, Zach Wilson, and you don't hear that kind of talk openly swirling about Zach Wilson. You hear this narrative that they're gonna try to work with him and he's gonna be mentored by Aaron Rodgers. Well, we don't hear that Malik Willis can be mentored by Tannehill, but I guess that's because Tannehill came out and blatantly said he's not going to mentor him. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, also Tannehill is supposedly also on the outs with the
Yes.
Titans, so
Correct.
he won't be there to mentor anybody at the rate that this is currently going. So it just has had no idea that Willis's narratives were being discussed. Something internal or
Yes.
just his play was deemed not good enough.
No, they were making the unfortunate comments about not studying the playbook, not having or demonstrating the work ethic, those kind of things. The same things that we see, unfortunately, with certain quarterbacks in the lead up to the draft. Those things were being spun last week as it relates to Willis. So I think that was just Tennessee setting up the narrative so that people wouldn't be too much shock and awe when they reached and selected Levis.
Yeah, I think it's clear. If you draft the quarterback last year and you draft another one this year, clearly you are saying that the quarterback you drafted last year, we ain't happy with him. So I think you see how that goes.
Yeah. So now you mentioned the word reach, Ricky. That brings us right
Yes.
back to the biggest reach.
Yes.
Mark, I'll let you take this one first. Who is the
okay.
biggest
Yes.
reach
Go ahead, Mark.
for
My biggest reach may not be a popular choice, but I'm going to say it anyway. A. Richardson, quarterback with the Colts.
Oh boy.
I
Here we
think
go.
that's crazy. I think it's crazy to pick someone with 1 year experience starting, 50-something% completion rate. He has all the tools. Don't get me wrong, physical specimen and all that. I can't think of any 1 year starter that has been successful in the NFL. I can't think of any. I can think of some who have not been. And so I mean, we could think of Trubisky. We can think of the boy who wanted to go to the Giants but ended up going to Commanders that got hit in the highway.
Right. Yes. Haskins.
Haskins, he was the 1 year starter. Yeah, I mean, he obviously he has to go and sit, or should go and sit and learn. And I'm not suggesting that he might not turn out to be a very good quarterback, but I do think he's a reach at number 4. That's my opinion. Absolutely.
Okay, interesting. Now, Pro Football Focus, not for the individual pick, but of course, this would have a great influence on it. They gave the Colts an A plus rating for their draft. And they made mention of Anthony Richardson's athleticism, that he has a very high ceiling, and that he's arguably the most incredible athlete at the quarterback position we've ever seen, where he forced 39 missed tackles in the just concluded college football season. Ricky, what about you? Who is your biggest? Well, before Mark, go ahead.
I just want to say something to that. I mean, a quarterback is not supposed to force 39 mistakes. That's not the job of the quarterback. The job of the quarterback is to throw the ball. Right?
Haters.
Well, I mean, yes, physical specimen, all of that, all those attributes. I want to see him making the decisions, seeing the right reads, and distributing the ball where it's supposed to be to get to. That's what the quarterback is supposed to do.
What was the completion percentage of one Daniel Jones coming out of Duke, sir?
Around 60%.
All right.
It wasn't 50-something%. It was 60%.
Man, you went to school long enough to know that you could get from 57% to 60%.
Well, I mean, Josh Allen went from 50-something to 60-something, but he had more experience playing. I'm not suggesting that he can't do it. He had more experience playing, and it's also who you're throwing the ball to. We know this, right? If you don't have people to catch the ball, that's not going to help your percentage completion. So, but I'm just saying, I'm not. Again, he's a physical specimen, and I don't know how smart he is. But if he's really smart and he puts in the work, he can succeed. But for me, it's a reach. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, again, I get the criticism, but in defending him in other quarters, I would say this: he can't get experience unless someone gives him an opportunity to get experience. So that's why I'll give him a blight for now.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest reach was the Detroit Lions. They were in position 6, traded away, picked up additional assets, moved down, and then moved back up to get to 12 to take Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, while I feel good about the fact that Mark and I had 2 running backs going in the first round, contrary to what a lot of the other experts, quote unquote, said, and I did have that person being Jahmyr Gibbs, ironically going to the Philadelphia Eagles, who then eventually got a running back and fulfilled their running back needs via the same Detroit Lions in the DeAndre Swift trade. I don't understand why you move out of 6, where you obviously had an opportunity at Bijan Robinson. Move down, so you say, okay, we're not going to waste the draft capital on Bijan Robinson or on a running back. Move down, and then somehow press the panic button and say, no, let's go back up so that we could get to 12 so we can take Jahmyr Gibbs before somebody else takes him. So that was very confusing for me. And while I call it a reach, is that if you are looking for one of these 2 top-tier running backs, but ought not to take Bijan at 6, move down, and then take Jahmyr Gibbs at 12, it means that, as Mark was telling me before we came on air, maybe the Lions thought they could get down to 12 and still land Bijan at 12. So something went wrong for Detroit in that period that they went back up then to 12 to get Jahmyr Gibbs.
So AJ says that Detroit was doing Detroit things.
Yeah, they were certainly not biting kneecaps, but they were stumbling.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we see happen on draft night. I mean, as much as they say I'm not much of a draft guy, I do understand strategy. So if you can tell yourself, well, we can get something, we can get more from moving backwards and staying put in the position that we're in, and we're comfortable going down to get who we think is going to fall to us, then that's what we're going to do. But in a
Correct.
situation like this now, where you move down, and then the guy you expected to fall to you drops off the board, then it's like, no, what are we going to do? Do we wait? Because more than likely they would have been looking at the teams above them and saying, well, they don't want a running back. They're most likely not going to take a running back. And then the best running back goes, maybe it's a good idea for me to get back up this board as quickly as I can to secure what Pro Football Focus had ranked as the second best running back in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, it was clear that
Agreed.
they were going to take a running back because of what they did leading up to the draft, right? So clear they were going to take a running back, but they definitely misread the situation because they thought they would have had you know their choices, anybody, but the Falcons messed them up and they panicked, and I thought and definitely said, look, we gotta get Gibbs.
Agreed, and it goes back to what AJ was saying earlier, where these teams, and Mark said this as well. These teams had different draft boards. The concept of assigning value to players was all over the shop. So this record number of trades and trade backs and trade down and trade out was because people had different assessments of what player value was and which player was top of the board, who was second, and so on. So you saw these moments of panic. I read an article right before we came on where the GM of the Arizona Cardinals said that trade they did with Houston was confirmed with 2 minutes left on the clock, and that they had three suitors at the time when the time started, and they made the deal with Houston with 2 minutes left on the clock. So that was just very interesting to see. Of course, he never mentioned who the other two suitors were.
Of course. Of course. We
Yeah,
would
no,
never.
it's interesting stuff for sure. I mean, you never know. You see, like because I follow obviously my Giants quite a bit. I mean, everybody wondered, well, why did the Giants move up one from 25 to 24 to get Deontay Banks, and they gave up a seventh and a fifth. And earlier in the draft, the Eagles moved from 10 to 9, higher position, and gave up a 2024 pick. So it depends on desperation at the time. I mean, right before that, Giants went into the draft knowing that they were wide receiver or corner. Right before that, they had 4 consecutive wide receivers that went off the board. And then they were left with 2 cornerbacks that they might take, Joey Porter or Deontay Banks. You said if they're okay with either one, then they don't have to move up. Clearly, they saw Deontay Banks as higher grade than Joey Porter, so they moved up. The flip side of that, what I heard is that the Raiders were looking to trade back into the first round to get Deontay Banks. So the Giants said, well, we're not taking any chances. We're going to take the guy that we want. So there are these little backstories all the time, and you never know.
Yep. We will never know. We will never know because the story, as Bujubata says, the fullness has never been told. So, as we are about to get out of here, I want you guys to take a look at your big boards, take a look at the draft, and tell me, who do you believe is the player taken on this weekend best positioned for success on the 2nd of May, before we go to training camp and everything? Who do you think is best positioned for rookie success?
Good. This is an excellent question.
Yeah, excellent question. Usually, the temptation is that you would pick a quarterback.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that.
I am going to say that um, Bijan Robinson is set up for success. I think that the Falcons have done enough with their O line that he should, and given that their offense is likely going to be um, based on the running game, I think he's a guy that's well set up for success. That's my opinion.
Okay. What about you, Ricky?
I think that I am going to go a little different, and I'm going to go. Yeah, I'm going to go with Zay Flowers from Baltimore.
Mm.
Simply because we've all lamented Baltimore has no weapons, Lamar has no weapons. In comes Todd Monken, who basically will call 4 pass plays on 3 downs. And you've had this off season where the national narrative has been, well, you haven't given Lamar the weapons, where Lamar said, okay, that's it, I'm out of here. And everything went full circle where you were able to re-sign Lamar, get this 5-year deal, bring in these weapons, and bring an OC who is known for throwing it on first down, throwing it on second down, throwing it on third down, throwing it on fourth down. So to me, if OBJ does what he's done in the last few years, he can be out a few games over the course of a 17-game season. You got Nelson Aguilar, which I mean, the next ball he catch will be the first. So basically,
Bateman,
Lamar has more Andrew. Pardon?
Bateman,
I starting to put
been
him in
injured.
the.
Yeah.
You're right. I started to put him in the handle with pure box. So you're quite right. So for me, young Zay Flowers, who I call the good Antonio Brown, comes into this opportunity with an opportunity to step right in and be, even if he's not the lead pass catcher, which Mark Andrews may still be, he has the opportunity to be the number 2 pass catching option on the offense that's gonna accentuate throwing the ball a lot more. So I do think Zay Flowers would be the rookie that is best positioned for rookie success.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. You have educated me, and I'm sure you've educated those who have watched and those who are listening to this podcast quite a bit because I I just can't get into the college game. The games play at times where I can't watch them anyway. So I depend on your expertise to help prepare me for what is to come. Now, at this point, we know that the NFL, at least in terms of the news cycle, it tends to fall into the background because everything was now leading up to the draft, and from the draft, the next thing we have to look forward to is rookie minicamp and then full training camp, which usually happens somewhere around June, July. So the NFL is going to get a little bit quiet, and then it's going to get really going again, I guess, around August or so. AJ apologizes. He says, sorry, I couldn't be there tonight, gents, but appreciate y'all for coming on and granting me some insight as well. Yes, we do not take your time and your expertise for granted, and we appreciate any time that you can come and give us some of it here. Now, with that said, this is going to be the end of tonight's episode. Next week we are going to be doing a bit of a pivot because the basketball playoffs are on. There's a game currently playing. I have not been following it tonight. I've been very focused here as to what we were talking about. So I have no idea what's going on with the Knicks and the Heat. I know that Jimmy Butler is not playing, so I hope for the Knicks' sake that they're actually doing well in this game. Because if they don't, and Jimmy's back next game, I think that the brooms
Right.
are going to be coming out. But
Would,
gentlemen,
would you like a live update, sir?
yes, please go right ahead.
With 5 minutes and 38 seconds left in the third quarter, Miami Heat 68, New York Knicks 66.
Oh dear, that game is way too close when the star player is not playing. And with what's his
Remember, the
name?
Knicks have two injured players too.
But
They're playing, but they're not. But they're injured.
okay, yeah, Julius Randle was supposed
You,
to come
you,
back tonight.
you recognize that this is a Knicks fan. Long suffering.
Mark, come
I didn't
on,
say. I
man.
just speaking the facts. I'm stating the facts.
The New York Rangers lost to my New Jersey Devils last night in Game 7, for those of you scoring at home.
Wow. I can't say anything because they don't really have a hockey team. Except that I heard everybody talking about the Avalanche, and the Avalanche, they were the defending champions, and then they actually sat down to watch a hockey game, and they got beat in Game 7 by the Seattle Kraken. Yeah, a
So
little
if
bit
that's
of,
the case, sir, I want you to watch the Golden State Warriors tonight so they would lose. Thank you.
no, I watched them on Sunday and they won, so you gotta be careful with that. But anyhow, let's end it here, fellas. I again thank you so much, and again thank you to everyone who has spent any time with us. We always invite you to like this video if you're watching us on YouTube or on Facebook, especially if you're on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell so that you can be told whenever we are live. If you're listening to us wherever you get your podcast, we thank you for your time as well. Spread the word. GreenBaje is always looking to bring more people into our family so that we can continue to grow this platform. We will be talking basketball next week. We have a guest coming on to talk about what's happening in these NBA playoffs. We haven't touched them for the last couple of weeks because it has been draft time. But next week we will be here again to talk some basketball. So for Ricky Nurse, for Mark Thompson, I am Ken, and AJ, he was absent again tonight. But we do thank you once again, and we will see you next time.